This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Eldorado Gaming. Eldorado Gaming is your site for gifts and gaming accessories like dice, playmats, and other items to bling out your games. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Eldorado Gaming, or our home site at eldoradogaming.com. Here at My Mythical Meta, we talk about gaming with friends and strangers, resolving conflicts, and keeping game nights fun, interesting, and recurring. Our game of choice is Magic the Gathering, but our hope is that what we share is relevant for board game players, RPG groups, and maybe even your poker night. I'm Travis. With my friends Derek, Randy, and Benjamin, we've been playing Magic together since 2014, and every game day is fresh and exciting. We've got families, we've got jobs, but with the power of friendship, our games go on. Subscribe to My Mythical Meta, presented by Eldorado Gaming, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to My Mythical Meta. I'm joined today by Benjamin.
Hello.
And Derek.
Hey.
No Randy here tonight. Just like planning for a normal game of Dungeons & Dragons, schedules do not always line up. But this is a podcast and not a D&D game, so it's okay if every once in a while somebody misses out. We've still got enough knuckleheads here to talk about these topics anyway.
Hey, the show must go on.
That factory fire.
What'd you say, Derek?
I said I heard Randy died in that factory fire. Back in the 90s.
Yeah, who knows if he'll ever return? I don't know. Well, his girlfriend just came back to town, so that might be it too.
Oh, yeah.
He got a girlfriend?
It does affect our gaming, this girlfriend of his.
This whole girlfriend thing really does affect our gaming, it's true. We're going to have to talk to Randy about it. In a session 0, we're going to have to set some expectations down. Whenever people play games together, it is important to talk about what people expect from those games. In Magic the Gathering, that's our game of choice, people have started calling this the Rule Zero conversation, something that comes before all of the rules of the game, where we talk about what we like. Session Zero is not a term that I came up with. Rule Zero is not a term we came up with. You can find the terms Rule Zero and Session Zero in most role-playing game books. You know, at the beginning of your Dungeons & Dragons rule books or anything else, usually in the first couple pages, they'll say, Rule Zero, the first most important thing about playing a game together is that people should have fun. That's the whole point of playing a game together. The fun of each participant is paramount. Social games seek to facilitate that fun. That's all Rule Zero and Session Zero are, is the expectation that if you're spending time together playing games, that people have fun doing so. But the prickly social situations come in that each person's idea of fun is varied. What is fun for one person might not be fun for another. And so, there's a huge challenge for all gaming groups, especially the bigger your group gets, to keep everyone satisfied. Derek, what types of games do you find fun? If you were able to create a perfect game or play a perfect game, what would it look like to you?
I wouldn't have put myself in this box, but I think I'm just really into like life sims, like playing The Sims 4. I think one of my favorite games of all time is Stardew Valley. These games.
I didn't know you were a Stardew man.
Oh man, I love it.
I had
lost
no idea.
My entire 2017 life into that game. I don't
like
play
that's a game that came up a lot for me, but I never got into it because I thought nobody else was into it.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's great. So like these games that are immersive and I can get lost and it's like casual, there's no stress or whatever. And then on the other side of that, I really like strategy games and tactics, that kind of stuff. I think a fun idea would be to somehow blend those two somehow, like maybe like put Pokemon into Stardew Valley or some other type of situation like that. That might be the perfect game for me.
Benjamin, how about you? What is a perfect what does your most fun gaming session look like?
Well, I really like games where there are multiple ways to win. And I don't just mean different strategies, but even different win conditions that people have to be on the lookout for. And that's one of the things I like about Magic is there are a bunch of different ways to win and different strategies that are viable. I like games where you get to build something. So when I'm not playing strategy games, a lot of tabletop games, I am playing sim games. Right now I'm really into City Skylines.
Oh yeah, I just tried to play that last week.
Yeah,
I can usually play City Skylines for about 2 hours, and then my traffic gets really bad, and I don't know how to fix it.
Well, that's where I've been, and I've started just experimenting with all sorts of interchanges and tunnels and overpasses and all this sort of stuff to try to fix it, and I've been playing around with it. But I think that combination of intense strategy with different ways to win plus building something is what makes Magic such a good game for me, because you can spend a lot of time building. If you have no one to play with, you just sit down and create a deck, right? Create another deck. Play around with stuff online on Archidect or whatever the other ones are. I pretty much only use Archidect these days. And create something, right? And then when it's time to play, it's a different game where you get to try to match your wits with an opponent who came with a different strategy and had their own chance to build. And so I like that combination of things where you get to build and you get to compete along different lines.
I think my most ideal games are character-driven.
Yeah.
The video games that I like to play the most are the ones with really great characters. It's no surprise to you guys that I love Dragon Age.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I just think the characters in that series are a masterclass. They're just so much fun. I think Cyberpunk is an awesome video game series and role-playing game series, but it's because they've populated the world with so many incredible characters. Johnny Silverhand, Adam Smasher, Rogue, Panam, Judy, just all of these characters have such deep lives, and I want to learn about all of them. And sometimes I will do the same thing in my Magic deck building. I will really fall in love with a character or even just a piece of artwork, and I think, how can I make the rest of this deck evoke this character's story or this feeling? I do also like sim games. I'm a huge fan of just straight up The Sims 4, where I get to control their lives and run them around. And I have one character named Chad Powers, who has mastered every skill. He's just a perpetual bachelor who has mastered every skill.
I have a similar character that I named John Godman, who has all the stats maxed. Level 5 celebrity. He's just, cream of the crop.
Yeah, exactly. Mine was Chad Powers, and this was back in The Sims 3, where he would travel to Egypt and he would study martial arts, and it was ridiculous. I think he also had 10 girlfriends at one time. But hey, in The Sims, anything is possible. So all that to say that each one of us has different ideas of fun. Now, we have some overlapping ideas, which probably makes us good friends and helps us to make good games, but we do still each have different inklings or desires of things that we enjoy most. I think a downfall of a lot of groups is that they agree on a game and then they jump right in. They hope that agreement on a game is enough to have fun. If we all agree to these rules, then we'll all have fun. I remember, what was it? Have you guys ever played beer pong?
Yes, absolutely.
And then just everyone has a different rule set.
Yeah, all these dumbass rules are it bounced twice and
it bounced twice, or they flicked it out with their fingers, or one of my friends had a rule called celebrity, where if it bounced and you could call somebody else to come for a reshot, or satellite. It gets more and more confusing the more different rules there are. The same was true, Benjamin, when we grew up with a pool table.
Yep.
Like, it is, everybody's got different rules for it. And then you start arguing over whose rules were the right rules and whatever.
Something that's anecdotal experience for every single human on Earth is every time you sit down to play Uno with someone, everyone's got a different house rule.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We had a house rule where if somebody plays a 0, everyone rotated hands.
Ooh.
Yeah. My wife's family slaps zeros.
They slap? Why?
They slap, and if you're the last person to slap, you have to draw a card or 2 cards.
Oh,
They
wow.
love those slapping
Okay.
games. They love speed games, so they couldn't just leave Uno alone. They've got where if someone plays a
Damn
card,
it, just leave Uno alone.
right? If someone plays a card, anyone who has that exact same card can also play it. So, like, if someone plays a red 2 and you have a red 2, even if it's not your turn, you can throw your red 2 down, and if then the next turn is whoever's next to the person who just played the last card. So 3 people
Wow.
might throw down a red 2, and
I like it.
and of course they stack the draw.
What'd you say, Derek? You like it?
I like it, yeah.
Oh, God, I hate that.
Yeah, I do too. And
Good Lord.
My childhood rule was that if someone plays like a +2 or a draw 2 or draw 4 or whatever, the next person could keep the pile going with another draw.
We
2,
did
draw
that too.
4,
oh yeah,
and keep going
Our family
until
did that
someone's
too.
just stuck with the pile.
So someone's stuck drawing 12 or whatever.
yeah. Well, they do that, and when you combine that with anyone with the same card can play it. It might be you play a wild draw 4, and the person before you has a wild draw 4. They can play it down and make you draw 8, even if the person that you played it on didn't have one. It was
That's absolute insanity.
yes. Playing Uno
That
with
is-
my wife's family is insanity.
No, there's no forgiving that. There's a special layer in hell for people who have taken Uno and twisted it past what it was meant to be. So, no games rules can dictate how you and your friends act towards each other. Okay?
Right.
And that's what a rule 0 or a session 0, that's what these conversations do. They establish interpersonal rules. Now, that seems super structured, and I mentioned a couple episodes ago that whenever I was in college and had my first roommate, I did go to a Catholic university, a very small university. It had a 1-building dorm, so they kind of had the leeway. I think their population has increased since then. This was 10 years ago anyway. But we had to write down a roommate contract about how we would address conflicts with each other. And however ridiculous that sounds, whenever I was a teacher, we did the exact same thing. We worked in what was called a PLC, a professional learning community, and we had to write down our norms. Things like being on time to meetings. We had roles about who would serve which role during a meeting. So recorder, team leader, timekeeper, things like that. We even had somebody whose job it was to be a norm snitch. When someone messed up on a norm, when someone was late, it was that person's job to call them out on it. Okay? That way, it's not a personal thing. It's not Travis poking fun at Kendra for being late. It's, hey, I was doing my job. We all agreed on the rules we were going to follow, and you broke them. And any workplace that has employees working in teams will hopefully have that team establish norms, promises that everyone agrees to follow so that a team can work well. It may sound kind of insane that we had people for all of those positions and we would write them all down. We would even say our norms at the beginning of each team meeting. But at the same time, if you looked back at our team's performance over the 3 years that we were together, we were a highly functional team getting great results every year because we were not wasting time holding silent grudges or sulking in the corner when someone spoke over us or just little things like that, because we had norms, we had established rules for how we were going to work together. And with everyone following them, we worked really well. Now, this isn't a workplace podcast, but being a good team and playing games together so that everyone has fun, it could be a teamwork podcast. When everyone in the group outlines what they want from their time together, the group works together to ensure that no one's time feels wasted. Benjamin, you worked at the same school as me. Did you ever have any experiences with PLCs, or were you always on a team by yourself?
Yeah, I was always a singleton, but our department did have norms. They were a little looser than it sounds like your PLC professional learning community team was, but we didn't have specific roles for like norms, niche and stuff. We just made fun of each other for being late, or everyone was called out when they messed something up, because we were that kind of group where we were kind of a work hard, play hard kind of group, because all of us are singletons basically, and so we're very much like, don't waste our time. We're doing this meeting because we have to, and if you are making it take longer or not up to snuff, then we're going to call you out on it. So we did have a different set of norms and different expectations, but once again, we all understood that. We were kind of introduced to that early in the school year, and since my department head has retired, the culture has shifted, and so and that's interesting to see, right? This is the sort of unspoken rule zero or session zero. You can kind of see it evolving. I could see there being problems when they're not as clear cut and everybody's on the same page as maybe your PLCs were. So that'll be interesting to see how it develops with the department head retiring last year.
Does your department head make more money?
Than who?
You.
Oh yeah.
Seize the gap, Benjamin. Fill
What?
the void. Fill the power void.
Oh no. Our department head retired at the end of last year, so we already had a new department head this past year.
Oh, boo.
Yeah. But
Derek, what is your working environment like? You haven't told us much about whether you work on a team or not. Do you think it would be improved through team norms?
So right now I work remotely. I just pedal around data entry stuff. It's pretty solo work. I have a quota to meet every day. And it's kind of, I work alone, and there's a group of us that work together towards the same project, but I'm kind of a cog in the machine, and all the cogs need to work doing their individual things so the whole machine runs. But I don't really work with a team, which is how I like it. I like to be alone.
Have you ever had an experience where somebody on your team or your team leader or boss interacted with you in a way that rubbed you the wrong way?
Oh yeah, but that's kind of working in, when you mess up, or maybe someone's in a bad mood, someone forgets they're in a working environment, it starts talking a little out of pocket. We all agree to put on our professional behavior and try to treat each other with respect, and sometimes, that might get crossed, that little line might get crossed every once in a while.
Right. I think that some people need... You just said we need to put on our professional behavior. Some people don't know what that looks like. Some people have either gone their entire lives not knowing or skating by because no one felt comfortable enough to correct them. There are lots of people who would benefit from a written down set of rules or a set of norms for people to follow. A couple episodes ago when we were talking about behavior at an LGS, some people are a little slower on the uptake when it comes to picking up social cues, and what the process of establishing norms does is it helps put everybody on the same page. Those are just some of my thoughts about the topic and why I think that Session Zero and Rule Zero, conversations that you have when you're going to spend time with people, I think that they are so, so valuable. Because I had such a highly performing team for so many years, I've seen the benefit of them. So we can kind of break this up into a couple of different categories. And we're going to talk first about the role-playing game Session Zero. If you're agreeing to spend multiple sessions with somebody in a row in order to tell a story. So I'm going to start with my kind of personal experience about playing Dungeons & Dragons with my Boy Scout troop. We would play on campouts. And so in the weeks leading up to the game, somebody would have chosen to be the dungeon master, and they would just tell us what level to make our characters. Okay, guys, we're going to play a game next weekend while we're camping, and it's level 3. You just tell me what level 3 character you're making. And everything else, everyone would just do using the book by themselves at home. So he said to make a level 3 character, and I show up with a half-orc barbarian with an orc double axe.
Hell yeah, brother.
Somebody else shows up with a gnome wizard. Somebody else, and it's just random.
Right.
We'd all show up with our characters, and because we built them alone, we struggled making a group. Either the group is unbalanced, everyone has showed up with fighters, which has happened several times in my lifetime. Everybody shows up with fighters, and so there's very little range support, or there's very little magic or healing or things like that. Or our characters have no interpersonal reasons to be together. My character, my half-orc barbarian, is a loner who only fights because he has to, because he's been ostracized by society. And another character, the gnome wizard, I was an upstart student at my mage academy, and I'm out trying to help others. And, I'm cheerful and have a positive outlook on life. It's really weird for those people to get together.
Yeah.
You end up with players sitting around at the first session, either afraid to talk to one another because we feel like we don't know each other, or the absolute worst thing that anybody's ever heard sitting around in a gaming group, my character wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
It's like trying to convince someone to play the game with you, despite having already agreed to do so. We're already in the game, and you're still trying to pull teeth to get people to actually play the game. I can think of so many cool characters that I made in the past who never got a good adventure. And I was part of that problem. I would get stuck on my character's backstory and ask myself, why is my character in this tavern? If the DM said you're all in a tavern, I might be the person, or I might have been the person saying, my character doesn't frequent taverns. He's an upright paladin who spends his free time at the local temple or whatever.
What a dweeb.
I know. I have been that person. Or I might have said, like, why would I agree to meet the mayor? Why would my character have agreed to the mayor's summons if the guards burnt down my home as a child?
So you can assassinate him.
Well, Derek, I wish I had had you for all my previous characters. I wasn't as sneaky back then as I could be now. So, like I said, I've been that person who let my character's backstory or whatever get in the way of playing the game, despite having agreed to play the game. I'm sitting here, in the tent or at the picnic table with my friends, and we are friends. We still laugh and talk to each other, but if we're trying to play the game, it doesn't work because our characters don't have any reason to be together. Now, on the other hand, the absolute best games I've ever played were when the group would create their characters together and we would intertwine our relationships. There are some games out there, some role-playing games out there that have built this into character creation. Like, it's literally in the book about, if your three friends are sitting together, create these bonds between them and stuff like that. But you can do this on your own with your friends and the DM. Before I kind of go on with more of these tips and tricks, I still want to hear from Benjamin and from Derek any experiences you guys have had either with problems in a D&D group or a role-playing group, or the opposite, really great games you've played, either because of a lack of a session zero or because of a session zero. Derek, why don't you start us off?
So I've had the same experiences. The good games you play are the ones I'm also in. We play with our wives and Randy and his. Well, I guess she'll start playing with us, his girlfriend. For the worst, and this could apply to video games like that when you play multiplayer or co-op or something.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember playing one game where I wanted to play more of a role play. I don't know. I guess I wasn't trying to be a pacifist or anything, but I was trying to use talking, persuasion, and stuff like that. I always enjoy that in games because it can get me out of fights that I don't have to do. And so I was trying to do that with this. God, I think it was like a storm giant or something like that. And I was like, hey man, we don't have to fight. And it was kind of working, but then the rest of the group just said, screw that. We just want to kill him. They kind of got a little murder hobo-y, and that wasn't fun for me, and it was annoying for them. We just wanted they wanted a hack and slash murder fest type thing, and I wanted a talking simulator, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like they wanted a combat adventure, and you wanted something that was more, diplomacy or investigative or persuasion and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just wanted I like the role play character part of it more than I like the combat.
This is coming from somebody whose current character is a full orc wrestler who just wants to suplex everything he sees.
God, it's the best thing ever. I watched too many Denzel Washington movies, and now I want to take that that level of action into every fight. On the best side, we had the last game we played, I had a Tabaxi rogue. And,
your catfolk rogue.
Yeah, so this was with Travis, me, our wives, and then Randy as the DM. And we had all made our characters together. We were all in-game friends. And man, what a great session, whole game that was. Everyone was on the same page. We'd have different adventures with different people and stuff like that. It was great.
Benjamin, I know it's been a while since you did the D&D or the Cyberpunk or the Mage thing, but do you have anything you want to add here?
Well, I do have very similar experiences to you with playing in the Boy Scouts and stuff, but I also played a lot outside of the Boy Scouts, especially with Will and with there was a guy named Chase that I would play Cyberpunk with, and a few other folks that I played D&D with regularly. And I had a similar problem to you, not the whole my character wouldn't do that sort of thing, but whatever I wanted my character to do, I always min-maxed it. So much where, if my character was a fighter, then he was going to be dumb as rocks. He was going to have every single intellectual or communication deficiency so that I could buff up damage stats. He was going to, if I was going to play a bard, I was going to find a way to max that out. And that always meant, now that did provide some interesting roleplay opportunities, but it always meant I never had a well-rounded character. It didn't always fit in with what people were trying to do, etc. And I've never really gotten over that. I still like to do that. I do that, when we played Martian Colony, you probably noticed I did that. I made a character.
I think I remember that. What kind of mech did you make again?
I made that one that was it looked kind of like a golem Pokemon. It was round with just claws. It had the rocket-powered elbows, right? And it had max speed and max power with the rocket-powered elbows, and it didn't do anything but fly straight at something and hit it real hard. It was
just a cannonball.
It was basically just a cannonball with a claw attached to it, and it had no armor. It was just so fast it couldn't get hit, and it would just fly up at something and hit it, and then run away, and try to do that over and over again. But also the character in that game was also a mute bodyguard that just obeyed the other characters and then ran around and hit things.
I feel like I vaguely remember you making a character in Scouts who couldn't read.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so that's in... there was a really funny game we played in Scouts that involves
talking
talking
we were
animals
that trapped in a research lab or something.
Yeah, that was a fun game. But yes, my animal could not read, and it had... Oh, this is an example. That character had a lisp. Why did it have a lisp? Because that gave you points to put somewhere else. And...
Yeah.
so everything of course, everything I said is that character had the lisp, and I'm sure that made it fun. But it also, I would go around asking the other characters, what's the thing? What's the thing? To try to get them to explain, because they could read, right? So I'm a munchkin. Let's get to that. I'm a munchkin when it comes to role-playing games. However, the best role-playing games I ever played were the ones where we didn't have a first game where it was all you're in a tavern and now you're meeting each other for the first time. It really was, before you show up to play, y'all need to figure out how you know each other, right? You can be a loner whose family was all killed and you be a happy-go-lucky bard from that has a bunch of friends. Did the loner happened to get rescued by your team, and now he begrudgingly accepts y'all as friends even though he doesn't really like anybody. Like, figure it out and tell me that before the game starts. And it required us to work together to create those bonds and to know what kind of game we were going to play before we even started, because we knew how our characters fit together, and we created their backstories together. And so if there was, even doing that with that Martian Colony game, the way I was able to have a bodyguard, an idiot guard that just was going to punch everybody to death, was we made somebody else's character a really intelligent, high-ranking commander who kept me around and ordered me to do certain things. And that created a game where the characters worked together because they had to, and they had been created together. So
Right.
And so I think that everything you're saying, as far as I've experienced it, despite not being role-playing games not being my main gaming thing, I've experienced that where the people who just show up with their characters all mismatched and haven't had, they don't know anything but what level they are. Yeah, that those games don't always work, and you waste so much time, right? You just had a weekend. It's not like you're carrying this a long-term campaign. Your weekend was spent half just trying to get the team together.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas games where the characters were created as part of a team-building exercise before the game even started, those games ran much more smoothly.
A recurring example from when I was in high school, and it kind of became a running joke, it happened so often, I would make a character that had a mount. A horse, and I would dedicate my in-game resources like feats and skills to mounted combat, lance combat, and all kinds of stuff. And one of my characters even had a war rhinoceros, but inevitably the DM would lead our adventure into a cave or some underground structure.
Yeah.
Where my animal's just like, nope, not gonna do it. So I would make characters, and then the game just like wouldn't fit for that character. I'm sorry, my mounted chevalier is not a dungeon crawler. So if the DM wants to run a classic dungeon with lots of monster combat, a player is going to often feel cheated if they made a character that's good at something else. If they made a character that's some kind of urban investigator that's great at conducting interviews, well, I don't really need to interview the giant spider. I don't need to interview the dire bear. Like, those are things that are not necessarily going to work out. So one thing that worked really well in college, I've talked about Richard already, is before any game, he would say, you've been traveling together for at least 6 months. And, like, we would just have to find out reasons to care about one another. Why have we been together for 6 months, and why have we decided to stay together for that amount of time? And the DM should be a member of those conversations. But these are things that, Derek and I have done group chats without Randy present before about what our characters wanted to do. So here is a brief checklist of questions that your role-playing group could work through before the game starts in order to make sure that you have a fun game once everybody participates. The first thing you should check is the genre of the game that you're going to play. We've been talking a lot about medieval fantasy, about Dungeons and Dragons, but that is by far not the only popular role-playing game or role-playing system out there. Modern superhero. Benjamin and I, when we were in high school, played a lot of Mage of the Ascension, which has this kind of modern gothic supernatural feel, concrete jungle. There's paranormal evil behind every normal evil in the world.
Right.
So setting the mood and the genre of the game you want to play beforehand is a really powerful move. Whenever we started our game with Randy, the last one you were talking about, Derek, with your Catfolk Rogue, I had said, because I wanted to make an investigator, that we should play a game that takes place mostly in cities, that has a lot of talking, and sure, there can be combat every once in a while, but it should be in an urban setting. And we all kind of made our characters around that. Kristen had her gladiator dragonkind fighter. Derek had his rogue. I had a warlock, but I was kind of like a police inspector who was going around and looking for clues and stuff. So setting the genre and the mood of your game, something that everybody agrees to ahead of time, that's going to help your game go really smoothly. Benjamin, tell us about that second bullet.
Yeah, what character roles and archetypes are needed? So you mentioned at the start of the episode where you had unbalanced crews where everyone was a fighter and you didn't have any healers, you didn't have any ranged combat. I think this is very, very common in like MMORPGs or other things where you go on a huge quest or you have to take down a boss where you need a tank. You need somebody who can do AoE effects, large swaths of damage to take out small minions, goblins, or whatever. You need
crowd control and healers.
You need your healers. You need all that. And even if your group agrees that you need those roles, sometimes like healing to me is boring. I don't want to be the healer. And if you make me be the healer, I'm going to be bored. And I'm not going to have fun playing our game. And I think that's a problem in a lot of groups where they find healers to be boring. And the way we've sometimes resolved that is we've either found ways to make everyone have a small bit of healing so we can skip that role, or we give the healer a secondary role, like also as the trap finder or also or whatever. I know the cleric and rogue don't usually go together,
right.
but you find something else for them to do, or some other motivation where healing actually gets them money and they get better loot or something. But if you shoehorn someone in, if you say you have to be the healer, go make your cleric now, and they don't want to do that, they're not going to be happy, right? And if you don't have a healer, your group is going to be at a disadvantage. So you have to figure out a way where people can have fun playing your game with those roles. And other games are going to have different archetypes that are needed, right? But the idea is that the group needs to be a complete group to be successful, and you're going to need to have this conversation ahead of time to know, hey, which roles do we absolutely need? Let's divide up those roles amongst us so that we can make sure that we can be successful in our games. And this is true not just of games, but you mentioned at work, right? I've experienced this often.
Mm-hmm.
I have a partner in the legal field where we take cases and we've divided up who does what, and it makes things much, much smoother. So, and it works in a marriage, right? Dividing up the work. Yeah, I mean, these games are supposed to be fun, as a marriage is supposed to be fun, but there's work to do, there's preparation that needs to be done, and it all goes much more smoothly if everyone agrees on who's doing what and what's actually needed for the group to be successful.
Yeah, my wife and I hate doing clothes, and she hates dealing with trash and dishes, so when it comes to chores, I take care of the trash and the dishes, and she takes care of doing all the clothes and stuff like that.
Perfect.
So it's like we're helping each other out, working as a team.
Yeah, so no one has to be the healer alone.
Yeah.
I remember playing Heroes of the Storm. I loved being the healer. Derek, do you remember, what was her name? Lieutenant Morales?
Yes, I do.
You just had that constant healing beam?
Yeah.
Anyway, the next idea, once you've decided which roles are necessary for your game, agreeing who is going to play each of those roles. In the D&D game that Derek and Randy and I are playing with our wives right now, the girls were having a hard time thinking about what they wanted to do. Derek had his heart set on his suplexing orc, so we knew that one position was taken. Frontline warrior, that position's occupied. So I spent a lot of time, I'm a little more experienced in these role-playing games, where I was the one saying, hey, I can be flexible. I want to make sure that, the Christians can get whatever job they want, the Christians can get whatever role they want, and then I can fill in whatever leftover space. I had this idea of a merfolk pirate who used a whip in order to control the battlefield, to move people around and place people in precarious situations, tripping, shoving, and stuff like that. But if none of the girls were going to play, for example, a ranged attacker, then that was something I was willing to do. If we're going to be in combat, most medieval fantasy is a combat-based game. So if we're going to be in combat, I want to make sure that we can deal damage from whatever position we're in. So knowing who wants to play which role is another thing that, again, you should set up ahead of time, kind of with the roles and archetypes. Derek, how about you hit that next point? How do your characters know each other?
For this latest game, we all were trying to figure out how we all were related or friends with or whatever. So Travis's Kristen, she was talking about doing something with, I think, school or something. And
It's kind of funny. She had decided that she wants to play a character like her in real life. Someone who has spent their whole life working in a cubicle, who wants to branch out and see the world. So now her character is doing that. She decided that her character is going to have been someone who had an office job most of his life and is now going out and finally adventuring. And she settled on a gnome investigator.
yeah, so she was like, how about we be, roommates or something like that? Like we're friends from, I guess War Academy or whatever finishing school is in fantasy world. And I was like, yeah, cool. And so that idea eventually morphed into 21 Jump Street with Jonah Hill and, oh my God, what's his name?
Channing Tatum.
Channing Tatum, yeah.
You ignorant swine.
So I like my character would have been the Channing Tatum, and she would have been the Jonah Hill, where she was the bookie person that wasn't really good with any kind of physical stuff, and I was the strong person but couldn't get through any like the written exams or any of the other higher intellect stuff. And we both helped each other through college, and so we built that bond there. And then Travis and we were like rivals. He was a pirate, and I met him on the job one time. And we got in a fight, and he was him and his pirate group weren't able to like take the ship and like cause get all our riches or whatever. But in the fight, I had caused so much damage to our own goods.
Yeah,
that
like
it was
collateral damage to your own goods.
It was like a Pyrrhic victory for us. It might have been even cheaper to just let y'all take stuff, because at least we'd have like a working ship. So we built this kind of rivalry with like a backstory, kind of like little events that happen here and there. And then how did we meet my Kristen? Was it like a bar?
So Derek's Kristen is an Amazon who comes from an island of only women, and she has decided that she wants to meet as many men as she can. So her story was that she was in a bar, and what was it? We were fighting, and then accidentally ran into somebody who was coming onto her.
I think I had thrown something at you, and you had ducked, and it hit the guy that was bothering her.
Yeah.
So like the whole situation made it seem like we were like saving her for some kind of scumbag guy.
Yeah. So the idea is that, and all of this happened, all of the story events we've come up with
before the game even started.
All of it happened before the game even started, before we even sat down for our first session. We've established all of these little relationships, which people are childhood friends, which people are coworkers, which people went to school together. Why would these people willingly spend more and more time together? Having reasons for that, just like actors who are asking the director, what's my motivation? That's what a role-playing game is. You're being an actor putting on a character. And so knowing your motivation to protect your other teammates from the DM's monsters or whatever, knowing those things are going to make your group that much more powerful, and you're going to have that much more fun doing it. Another idea is to establish a common goal for all of the characters. What do the 4 or 5 of you want? It's fine for characters to have individual goals and objectives. That's going to give your dungeon master or your game master ammunition to work with whenever they're crafting their adventure, but you should also have a common goal that you can reach by staying together. And remember that everything you come up with, all of this stuff that we came up with before our game even started, all of it is ammunition that the DM can incorporate into the world. Knowing that my character used to be a pirate, well, now Randy has established, or I've helped Randy to establish, that there's a pirate coalition in his world now, and he can use as much or as little of that as possible. With Derek and Kristen having been old school chums, well, now Randy can incorporate as much of Fantasy War School. He can incorporate as much or as little of that into his game as possible. Is there anything you guys want to add about role-playing games or Session Zero?
Yeah, maybe this goes with what genre of play. Do we want to have a story-based game where we talk a lot and we act a lot, or do we just want to go beat people up? Do we want to cast fireballs and smush big monsters and all this stuff. I'd go even a step further. Even if you want that second one, you just want everybody wants to fight. Do you want it to be easy? Do you want your people to be like gods that are destroying things and you're just getting to do a bunch of cool stuff? Or do you want it to be
yes?
Or do you want it to be hard? Do you want the possibility of a TPK to be very real and every role matters and all of that? Like, some people don't want that. They created a character so that they could feel powerful, and then they're gonna go up against a Tarask or something and die, and they got to play their character one game.
Yeah, something that I remember you and me and Will and maybe some other people, but I don't remember. You guys are the ones I remember doing this most. With Mage, we would just say, okay, we all just want to fight. Well, let's just fight each other.
Yeah.
And we would just do what we called Mage battles, where everybody would make a character having the same amount of points to distribute amongst your skills and your abilities and stuff. And then one player would still be a game master who would kind of referee the game and make sure that people's actions were within the interpretations of the rules and stuff, or who would set up the environment. And we would just say, okay, you guys know each other and you all want to kill each other. You want to be the last one surviving. And we would just take turns like that. Maybe that's the genre of game you want to play, and it becomes a little more competitive. Who knows the rules better about this game? I know that there's a class of Dungeons & Dragons players that do this. They say, what combo of abilities can I put together in order to create the most powerful character of that level or something?
That's a great example from our past. I had forgotten that, but now that you mention it, I remember doing that several times. We basically want a role-playing game that's a video game, and we don't want a bunch of stories. So why, don't ask the DM to do it, just go fight. And so I think having that established early on is going to make everyone's day better. And I think this is going to be a good segue, or I hope it is, into our next topic about Magic, because it's along the same lines, right? Where you say, if you want to have a long game where everyone has a chance and it's a slog fest, that's different than if everyone's trying to combo out on turn 2 or 3. And it's the same thing in a role-playing game. If your guy is just Hulk smash while the other person's trying to finesse their way through a bunch of intricate mazes and stories and puzzles and convincing people of things and all this stuff, those two characters are going to get in each other's way, and somebody's probably not going to have a good time.
Something like you said is that we don't all have to be in the spotlight at all times. Let someone else be the hero for a minute, and if I'm playing the dumb orc, if someone's really good at talking or finessing their way through things, let them take the lead instead of me forcing myself onto the group.
Yeah, but Derek, your character wouldn't do that.
Well, if it's his friends, he would.
Boom. Got it. Drop the mic.
He's not without manners.
Something Randy did really, really well in our last game, and he even made this explicit. He just said it up front. He was like, okay, guys, this session, this adventure is Kristen's. Mm-hmm. This adventure is Travis's. And he gave each of us a story where he said, I made this one just for you.
Aww.
It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
For example, for Derek's quote-unquote adventure, we all ended up basically becoming the Power Rangers and unlocking a Megazord in order to fight a giant
grave
skeleton
thing.
In order to fight a giant, fleshy skeleton golem that was about to destroy a town.
And you know how we beat him? Suplex.
Suplex. So,
I've got it tight.
A really great group, and again, you tell me ahead of time that it's Kristen's show, that we're going to be meeting her father in this adventure, and that we're going to be helping her father to protect their hometown from a monster. You tell me ahead of time that that's what's up. I'm happy to play supporting cast in that episode, right? Because it sounds cool. Because you're telling me ahead of time what role each person's going to play in that particular adventure. So the second genre of games, the second type of pre-game conversation we're going to talk about is for collectible games. So we've said many times, our game is Magic the Gathering. Each player has to construct their own decks ahead of time, and then we bring them together in order to play those games. But a lot of games fit this profile. Warhammer 40k, Star Wars Legion is a more recent game. They kind of stopped doing Imperial Assault and devoted all of their resources into Star Wars Legion. Star Wars X-Wing, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, both Pokemon cards and the video game. You're going to spend time on your own developing your Pokemon and training them and getting them to have the right moves before you come into the game, before you come into a battle. Yu-Gi-Oh! And many more. With games like these, players spend time on their own preparing in order to play. They prepare to play. So they're going to make their decks, they're going to form their armies, they'll craft their list. And in some cases, with games like Star Wars Legion and Warhammer, they're going to spend actual time and money building and painting the physical pieces they want to play with, beyond just learning the skill and the strategy that they want to use for that game. All of the games I've mentioned require money, actual money to play. If you're investing actual money to preparing to play your game, then you expect a payout. You expect a payout from the time you get to spend actually playing it. It can be very disappointing to have invested time and money into a game only to be disappointed when you're actually playing, or to feel that your time was wasted when you actually get to play. That's why these Rule Zero conversations before playing a game are very important, so that everybody can get what they want out of it. Now, in a highly competitive setting, especially one with prizes on the line, competitive Magic, if you're playing standard Friday Night Magic or a Grand Prix or qualifiers, if there's a game with prizes on the line, Rule Zero might not be necessary. There is no Rule Zero. There's just the rules of the game. We're going to see who knows those rules best in order to win. All the players showing up for the competitive game for the prizes, they've already agreed that the reason to play is to win. That's why they're devoting, their 3 hours on a Saturday for the pre-release or whatever. That's why they're there. They've all agreed that the reason to play is to win. And I said this a couple episodes ago, play groups that are highly competitive are usually very healthy. They want to play and win against tough and smart opponents, and because they already know that their opponents feel the same, feelings usually, there's always a caveat here, aren't hurt. Or the social agreement, the norms they agreed on, are that people aren't upset whenever they lose. So, games attract their players in different ways. Strategy and mastery of gameplay is only one way that games attract players. Artwork, themes, lore, all of these attract players too. Those are the things that got me into Warhammer 40k. Those are the things that got me into Magic the Gathering. Players may want to experience the game in other ways despite gameplay disadvantages. Me choosing to play Death Guard or Nurgle armies in Warhammer 40k, that may be a potential gameplay disadvantage if I'm going to ignore some of the other demons that I might have access to in an army. Players should say up front what they expect and what they're bringing to the game. I want to start off by sending it to Derek or Benjamin. What do you guys think about how games attract players and the investment of time? What do you guys want to add here?
I think Travis did a pretty good job of covering here the lore,
Yeah.
the lore, the art, the gameplay. I think the online communities are really important, and I don't know that games themselves do this as so much as just people who were attracted by one of those other things get on and start talking to each other. They create Reddit forums. I remember before I was on Reddit, I was on the Magic forums. I mean, they're all over the place. That's really what got me through some periods where I didn't have a lot of people to play or a lot of time to play, but still wanted to stay connected. is I was on Reddit a lot listening to people talk about it, and so I think creating that large community can keep people in the game once they found it.
I did the same thing with X-Wing. The only people I was really playing with were literally just Derek and occasionally my wife Kristen when I could, wrangle her arm into playing a game with me. And Randy would play if it's what Derek and I wanted to play. But, I mean, I found an X-Wing podcast. I was on X-Wing forums because I was only literally playing with only one person. That's my first example. I spent several years, probably 2 or 3 years, getting into Star Wars X-Wing, the miniatures game. This game had everything that I loved. Obviously Star Wars, ships, space battles that felt intense, where every piloting move mattered. And at the time, the strategy was deep enough to scratch the itch. This is before First Edition was so bloated that Fantasy Flight Games literally reset the game with a second edition. That's just a side note for anybody who's out there who's interested in X-Wing. So I really enjoyed making lists on the fly that were fun and thematic. So I would make a red squadron with 3 X-Wings. Luke Skywalker, Biggs Darklighter, and Wedge Antilles. 3 X-Wings together. Or maybe I would do Black Squadron. Darth Vader in his TIE Advanced with a swarm of TIE fighters to back him up. And when I played with friends at home, when I played with you, Derek, and with Kristen, we would have really long games, sometimes 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
But they would have nail-biting endings. They'd have thematic stories with characters that we knew and last-minute turns and piloting errors. Oh, you bumped into a rock. That's the worst thing that could have happened. And it was a ton of fun because we were creating our own original Star Wars battles. I agreed one time to meet a friend and his group at their local shop. And I brought my Red Squadron 3 X-Wing list. One of their friends, so this wasn't my friend, but my friend's friend, he had a top tier, top meta list. And for anybody who cares, it was the Dengar Jumpmasters list, where you could just alpha strike with missiles and usually kill somebody on turn 2 or 3. Just completely neuter their entire group by taking out their ace, and it'll just be done. And that's exactly what happened to me. The game was over on turn 3 to an alpha strike that obliterated my list, and it simply was not a balanced game. I had never played X-Wing at that level in order to figure out, first, the combinations of cards and ships that can accomplish that, but secondly, that's not the kind of battle I ever wanted to have with my wife Kristen or with Derek. So the game that I had with this guy at the shop simply was not a balanced game. I didn't enjoy getting blasted out of the sky without a chance to use any of my abilities. And frankly, I don't think he actually enjoyed winning without a fight. Now, we were strangers, and we hadn't discussed the kinds of games that we wanted to play. We did play a second game. It had the same result. I hung around for another hour or so and watched my friend and his group get in some more high-powered games. And I don't think it was anyone's fault that we didn't enjoy those games together. And in fact, I think it was probably more my fault than his. When we play with strangers, we should assume that the other player wants to win. It's a game that declares winners, right? So I should have assumed that that's what this other person was going into this game with. I didn't make that assumption, and I paid the price. I didn't have a lot of fun at that outing. Have any of you guys ever been in that situation where you came into a group of strangers and what you were prepared for was completely different from what those strangers were prepared for? And whether it's specifically Magic or any other game, have you ever been in that situation?
I've been in it a few times. I remember one of my very first, I was a kid and Yu-Gi-Oh came out and I was in like a small country town or whatever, so there wasn't like a lot of stuff to do. And they were going to throw a Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, get together or competition or something like that at a Hastings, which is like a video book music store type thing. So as a kid, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. And as a kid, I think it's good because I don't know anything better. The internet wasn't great back then. I went up there. I might as well got slapped in the face just immediately. just kicked in the mouth, pushed down on the ground. It was awful. And that was my villain origin story, and now I'm trying to find the people who wronged me. And we've also had games of Magic. I remember a guy taking, infinite turns, and it's like, okay, well, that's it.
We were just not ready for that type of deck to pop off with us.
Yeah.
Benjamin, have you ever been in that situation where what you came to the table against strangers was just completely different than what they had?
Yeah, and it's kind of been the other way. And actually joining this group once I moved back to Houston was kind of like that, where I built decks. In fact, I've been a competitive Magic player for a long time, and I was the one, going to Spike F&Ms and trying to win at Grand Prix and stuff. Now, I never did very well in the main event, but I've won a couple side events and such at Grand Prix or Magic Fest. And so I was always playing for prizes, trying to min-max my decks just like I min-maxed my characters. And then when I joined this group, it was not necessarily a bunch of noobs. Travis, you'd been playing a while, and I think Derek had been playing a little bit of time. Randy, being the social gamer that he is, didn't really know what he was doing. And
man, he's not even here to defend himself.
He would agree.
I'll say it to his face.
And so I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, where I spent a lot of the early time, it was 3v1 and I would still win. And that's not, I've since learned that's not the game that y'all want to play, and it's not really the game that I wanted to play, right? This isn't a Grand Prix. This is an at-home, 4 guys getting together to shoot the breeze and have fun. And I started realizing that y'all weren't having fun and I wasn't having fun, and we had to change how we were playing. Yeah, I've had that experience here. There have been times where this is before Commander was even a big thing. I made decks that were thematic for Standard or Modern, and would go to an LGS and play with strangers on a Saturday, where they were bringing out, legacy decks or decks that were powered up that my theme deck just wasn't prepared for. And I didn't blame them, because I understood, when you're playing with strangers, that you should expect that they play to win. Like you said, that's always been my mindset. And so adjusting to a meta where that's not the norm has been more difficult for me.
So in terms of Magic the Gathering, I have occasionally been on the other side of this, where me and Derek or the people in our group have a stranger come in, and then we were the more powerful groups, or we were the more powerful decks. So when you go to an LGS, a local game store, it is very, very common for it to just be crowded with Magic players looking to jam in games. And it's because of what we talked about first. They're looking to play a game and not necessarily to
make friends.
Not necessarily to make friends. They want to jam in games. So our play group, I do think, is focused. I do think we have strong decks that are focused, but it's not a competitive meta. We build strong decks that can win, but not win at all cost as soon as possible. I like to describe our group as a pro wrestling meta.
Yeah.
Our games, we want to win, but we've got big moves that we want to pull off. We want to make a show. We want to show that our deck did the thing. We want to live up to the story behind why we built our decks or whatever. So we don't necessarily play super tight or completely optimized in order to win. We want to make sure that our deck can get off its big pro wrestling, luchador jumping from the top rope move. And sometimes when we're playing, we let our rivalries or our alliances take the stage. We fight them out and stuff like that. And it doesn't happen often, but it has happened where me or Benjamin or me or Randy, we meet at the shop because not all 4 of us can join. And then we find some randoms, and then those strangers can't handle what our deck is doing. Benjamin, I'll never forget when we were playing and I pulled out Angel Tribal.
Right.
And you pulled out, what was it that you were doing?
I was doing
that particular game?
The human +1/+1 counters.
Human +1/+1 counters. And a guy says, I thought we agreed to fair magic. Because I don't remember what I had done. I think Angelic Arbiter. I think I had played Angelic Arbiter, which says you have to choose between playing spells or going to combat.
Yeah. And
Benjamin had done something else. I don't remember, but
my humans were pretty big because they all had +1/+1 counters on them.
Yeah, so... But I know that it's happened with me and Randy once before, whenever I was playing my new Ovika Enigma Goliath deck after the Phyrexia set came out, and I ended up winning in 5 or 6 turns. You know, people say, "Man, I thought we were playing fair Magic," and we thought our decks were fair, but they're fair to each other. You know, my Hulk Hogan deck is fair to Derek's Ultimate Warrior deck.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
Hell yeah, brother.
Those people are all ready to fight against each other. But when a stranger comes in, I wouldn't say that Macho Man Randy Savage is ready to fight against a UFC or MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, a 9th grade kid in his judo class. Like they're not in the same league. And if you haven't set that up ahead of time, then it's not going to work out, or it's not going to feel fun. Now, I will say that I've yet to meet somebody who is actually a really bad sport, somebody who got up and grumped their way off or anything like that. Usually the strangers we see at our game shop have a decent amount of social acumen. But I do surf the subreddits, and it's amazing how just crowded they are with discussions about salty players on either side of that situation. So the point of talking about all of this is, and the point of devoting an episode to it, is how can we avoid it? How can we avoid an awkward situation where everybody gets what they want from the hour or two that they sign up for when they agree to a game with a stranger? How can we prepare a stranger for what we've brought? Or how can we establish norms for a game with a stranger? And I think the biggest thing is transparency. You know, being honest about what your deck, list, or army is capable of. Every time I've played my Ovika Enigma Goliath deck since then, I tell people, you know, Ovika has Ward, and you really should get him off the table as soon as possible if you see him, because that deck is not going to last much longer after I play it. And the same was true whenever I had an Avacyn Angel of Hope deck. I said, this is a board wipe tribal deck. If I get Avacyn out, I'm taking away all the rest of your stuff. So transparency, being honest about what your deck actually does and what's your deck's game plan, how fast can it win. And as I was kind of writing this up and thinking about it, there's a quote in The Dark Knight where the Joker makes a remark about how humans are fine with bad outcomes if they've been warned about it in advance. He has this thing where he says, you know, on the news, if they say that somebody's going to get shot, everybody's fine with it. But if it comes as a surprise, everybody loses their mind. And I think this is absolutely true when it comes to playing strangers. I played with a stranger who took out a several $1,000 deck. It was probably worth maybe $4,000. It was obvious that he was very proud of it. It had rare, powerful, and expensive cards, and he wants to show it off. Hey, it's a collectible card game. Why shouldn't he want to show it off? But he warned us ahead of time. He said, this deck is really powerful. It has lots of ways to create infinite mana or draw out as many cards as I want in order to create game-winning combinations. He says, I've got a lot. He told us ahead of time. He said, hey, if I play a card that says search my deck for any card, for the uninitiated in Magic, that's called a tutor. If I play a tutor that allows me to search my deck for any card, the ending could be coming at any moment. I've probably got a combo. So y'all need to be working for that and holding up disruption for it. And he told us ahead of time, and it became a really fun experience. We get to see all of his expensive cards, and we know... And he kind of told us and established ahead of time, I'll probably be the archenemy for this one, but I want to test what my deck can do and show off all of my cool, expensive cards. So we were playing tighter than ever. We were looking for openings and cracks, trying to disrupt the guy. I saved cards for him instead of my other opponents. Now, I did not go into that game with the expectation to win. And so instead, the entire game, I tried to learn and just admire his collection of historic cards. Losing that game wasn't a surprise, and so it didn't feel bad. how does this grok with you guys? Do you think transparency is a way to ease some of the social prickliness of a situation like this? What do you guys think of that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think transparency is key with any relationship. But, if I'm sitting down with a stranger, I've got my magic deck. Say I pull out my Thrun deck. I was like, hey, it's a Voltron deck. It's trying to do typical Voltron things. I'm going to try to hit you as hard as I can with this one guy.
Yeah, there's a Commander YouTube channel. I think it's Covert Go Blue, where they have the worst possible Commander show.
Yeah, I've watched a couple episodes of that.
And what they do at the beginning of every show is say, here's the biggest thing my deck can do. And, right, like, it can make a board full of infinite tokens, or it can... And that's essentially what you're talking about, kind of displayed there. And I think that's a really good example of the transparency, where you know what to look for and what kind of game you're getting into before you even get started, and everyone's on the same page, and it kind of gives you the chance to opt out. There's been a couple times where we've talked about that, where I see one of y'all pull out a deck, and I make that decision: do I want to play against that deck with this deck, or do I need to change? And so I think that transparency is definitely a good way to have a good gaming experience.
So I can hear the comments rolling in. Transparency is nice, but I still want to win. I still want to win the game, so how can I win the game and keep no secrets? Now, some people like to win games at any cost, and any game that names a winner will draw those players. Okay? Any game that has competition or prizes or money will attract those players. Players who want to win no matter what. You have to decide what winning means to you. If winning is the most important thing about sitting down at the table with strangers that day, if it's Friday night and your shop does Commander, our shop just does Commander now. They really don't fire off standard, Pioneer, or Modern games anymore. Commander is just the most popular format. It's the format that gets people in the door to spend money on product, and so it's all just Commander free play nights. If you're the type of person who wants to win at any cost, then you need to stay in the competitive circuit. Maybe you need to play online on Arena, or maybe you need to find a different shop if you can, where
there are no social rules.
Where they are firing off events like Pioneer or Modern or things like that. Most people like winning, but there needs to be a nuance for why people play games. And I think a lot of people have that nuance for why they play games. So I love the feeling of winning, but only if I fought against someone else's best. And we talked about that a couple episodes too. I don't get a lot of satisfaction when I beat somebody else because of bad luck, because they were mana flooded or mana screwed or whatever. I want to win knowing that my strategy or my deck was built better than my opponent's. What do you guys think about balancing transparency in an effort to have a good social experience versus the desire to win? What would you guys do here?
This might be a hot take or whatever, but I don't think being transparent about strategies or a specific card is gonna stop you from winning. At least a game like Magic, where there's so much randomness, like depending on what cards you draw.
Yeah, so much variance.
Yeah, if you've got open mana, there's no telling. So I don't feel like that is going to affect anything. It's like you either have it or you don't.
Well, the competitive players have ways to eliminate that variance. They'll play tutors, or they'll play cards that they'll play lots of duplicates of a certain effect.
Yeah, and again, like you said, they'll play duplicates. So I feel like if there are more than one card that does the same thing.
Right.
So, you have backups for your backups for your backups in those types of situations. So I don't think having transparency is any kind of deal breaker, or, just the transparency saying, hey, I'm going to win at whatever cost, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to stop you as best I can. Even that is letting someone know what they're in for.
That's true.
Yeah.
Just saying ahead of time that I'm not here to politic or make deals. I'm here to win. And that will certainly get the rest of the group on their toes if they weren't already.
Yeah.
Right. And saying what kind of deck you're playing doesn't give it away. Like if you say, hey, I'm here to pillow fort, I'm going to set up every single defensive card and you're gonna have to pay 20 mana to attack me with a single creature, and you're going like that doesn't stop me from doing that, right? It maybe inspires you to attack me early, but that's what you should have been doing. And if this was the second time we had played each other, you would have known to do that. And so
Right.
it depends on, do I want to win by the element of surprise? Maybe I keep certain cards secret. I might say, I'm not going to fully disclose every single interaction. You need to be on your toes, like you were saying. But generally speaking, this is an aggro deck, or this is a control deck, whatever.
This is specifically for Commander, but we all know, we all see what your commander is. It's laying there the whole game. At least us, this group, have played enough games and ingested enough Magic content to know what almost every commander wants to do, or at least like the most, mainstream form of that deck. So,
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Every time a new commander comes out, all of the podcasts are saying, well, this is how I would build it. And now there are websites like EDHREC that are so popular. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, EDHREC scrubs actual online deck lists from throughout the internet and then compiles them into data that you can scroll through for any given commander or card. So you can literally see 68% of people who built this commander included this card. And just a quick glance at a commander's page can give you a good idea about what most people are going to do with that deck, which is going to front load a lot of information as soon as you see it in the command zone, even if you're playing against a stranger.
So I think there is the idea that there are some people out there that they want to win at any cost, and therefore they also want the element of surprise, right? They want to be Sun Tzu, keeping their plans hidden and attacking from the heights and all that stuff. But I think that I don't get that thrill from saying, oh, you didn't know I could do this, so I played these two cards and you didn't know what they did, and so I win. Oops. Right? Like, that wasn't a competitive game. Even if you were playing a more powerful deck than I was, the fact that you didn't know to look out for something and it just caught you off guard, well, I don't feel good about winning that way, right? I want to win in a way. Now, if this was a competitive thing where the idea was we're all trying to win, I absolutely feel good winning that way.
Yeah,
right?
If there were prizes on the line, or if I'm Sun Tzu and the political survival of my culture depends on me winning, then yeah, I will surprise somebody from the hillside.
Right.
But if all that's happening is I'm sitting across the table from somebody and they're like, all there is just a good social experience on the line. That's the only thing that's on the line when I'm sitting in a table of four.
I mean, there is winning and pride and all that stuff on the line, and I understand that there are lots of people, especially if you're sitting down with strangers. I don't care about my relationship with you, right? I don't care about trying to I don't care about the next game because there may not ever be one. Right. But I still, right, at those times where there's no prizes on the line, and this doesn't just go for Magic. This is all of my favorite board games and tabletop games where I may play it with you once and never again. I want to win because I outmaneuvered you on a level playing field. And so when I'm teaching somebody a new game, I like to over-explain the rules so they can't ever say that there was something they didn't know. Or I go into it saying, this one doesn't count, and we'll play another one. Or something like that, so that everyone sees every angle, and then we will match wit. And if this is the only time I'm going to get to play with you with this deck, I want you to know what it can do so that you're on your toes, so that I'm playing against a worthy opponent and I feel good about my victory, and not, oh, I did something you didn't expect and there was nothing you could do about it. Oops.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of pride in that, but I think most people would benefit from that sort of attitude that really, when you're playing with strangers, you're playing against yourself in a way that and maybe there's a bit of metaphor for how people live their life. I don't know if that's true. That might be too deep. But I kind of feel that way with some people want to win easy and want to keep every single advantage on their side, even at the expense of a good experience or a good time for others. And some people want they like the challenge and want to be challenged, even if that means they don't win because they gave up an advantage. And I'm in that latter group, right? I actually want to play from behind. I want to be the underdog. I want to have over explained what my cards do, or and y'all will catch me doing that sometimes where I say, hey, if you let this I have the infinite combo in hand. If you don't kill this thing, I'm going to win next turn. Good luck. And I will announce that to the board.
Yeah.
Because and that doesn't mean I don't have ways to defend it or whatever, and doesn't mean I'm not going to do something surprising in the moment, but I want you to know that the win is coming, right? And see what you can do about it. I think that helps with the transparency and still wanting to win. You can still be competitive and have a competitive attitude without ruining other people's or your own experience in that game because you were mismatched or playing for different reasons.
Right. I also think that when there are no stakes and you're playing against strangers for no prizes or whatever, that is just more and more opportunity to grow and learn and become a better and better and better player.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting down at Friday Night Magic or a Grand Prix, I'm certainly not going to tell my opponent, you better be holding up some removal for whatever's in my hand. Like, I'm probably not going to be telegraphing that. But it's kind of like giving your opponent a handicap in order for you to keep practicing. I want to keep making sure that my play gets better and better and better, and so I'm going to give my opponent an advantage, even if it's just an advantage of knowledge about what might be coming, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, a great example of this, but and kind of both using Magic. There was we went to that Magic Fest in Dallas, I guess 2019, and I was on a Smallpox deck, and for anybody who doesn't know, Smallpox says each player discards a card, sacrifices a creature, sacrifices a land, and
I think loses one life just on top of it.
Right, and loses one life
for no reason.
And it wasn't the best deck. I think I went 3-3 and dropped because I wasn't going to make day 2 and wanted to do some other stuff. But there was a game that was practically a bye because I was going up against an Infect deck, and back then. I know Infect decks have kind of evolved a little bit, but back then, Infect decks basically, they played 1 or 2 Infect creatures. They had a very low threat density. Basically, they would play 1 Infect creature and then protect it and pump it to get you to 10 poison. And basically, it was a race to get you to 10 poison before you could set up. Well, that meant they played very few creatures and very few lands, right? All their stuff was 1 or 2 mana. They would play practically no lands and practically no creatures. They just needed 1 or 2, and the rest of their deck was all instants, pump spells and stuff. And so Smallpox wrecked that deck because
they had to sack a creature.
Yeah, they play 1 land, they play their creature, you play Smallpox, their board is empty, and they've lost one of their pump spells on top of that.
Oh, because they had to sack a land too.
Yeah. And
oh my god.
And so that, like, I remember I sat down and the guy was so nice, and of course I wasn't going to tell him what I was playing, but he knew after the first game, right, when we go to sideboarding. But going into sideboarding, he's like, I don't have anything that can stop this, right? And of course not, right? That's just not the game he set up to play, and he didn't. I wrecked him 2 games in a row. They were the easiest games I played all day, and I wasn't about to give up. I wasn't about to board out. To sideboard out my Smallpoxes just to give him a sporting chance. Right. But on the flip side, so we've mentioned a few times over the last few episodes Randy's token deck with life gain, his Darien King of Keeldor deck. And I have a deck that just kills tokens for fun and profit. And anytime I see that he is playing Darien...
God, what's his name?
Grismold.
Yeah, that's right.
Grismold says every time a token dies, he gets a +1/+1 counter. And so the whole thing is made to kill tokens. And I've got basically every...
Kill tokens specifically with extreme prejudice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've got...
Travis and I are paying for Randy's mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, but I put that deck away. Like, if I pull it out and then I see Randy pull out Darien, I will put Grismold away and pull out another deck. Because he's not going to have a fun game. His deck is not going to do the thing. And it's too easy. Right? Now, could he get lucky, and would that be the greatest victory he's ever had? Yes, but I don't want to take that chance of, ruining an hour of his life because I wanted an easy game. And it's only going to be easy against him anyway. I might still lose to one of you two while also making his life miserable.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, what might happen is that Travis and I are like, oh, we feel bad for Randy, so we start, beating the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Maybe, but the thing is, his deck would make the tokens and they would immediately die and Griswold would get bigger.
Right.
Like it would.
I do remember one game where I stole Griswold and killed you with him.
Yes.
Live by the Griswold, die by the Griswold.
Exactly.
But I think that's the example I want to go with. In the competitive event, I kept the advantage. I'm not going to share strategy. I'm not going to do any of those things that's going to help the other guy catch up to me. But in our friendly games, I do want to win, but I'm not going to keep every advantage and risk the misery. I want to try to play, from level or from behind and try to get better, right? I already know I can beat token decks with a deck where every card kills tokens. Can I beat it with a Pillow Fort deck or a Life Gain deck? I don't know. I'm going to try. That's how you can still play to win without caring that you're giving up certain advantages, right? Giving your opponents advantages when there's nothing at stake is for your long-term benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Derek, anything you want to add here?
No, I think that's it.
There's one last major thing I wanted to hit. I do think it should go without saying, but we shouldn't play with cheaters or liars.
Yep.
This whole game, or this whole discussion has been about Session 0, Rule 0, establishing what you want at the beginning in order to make sure that everybody has a good time. We've mentioned that we agree to the rules of a game before playing with one. So it should go without saying that no one wants to play with a cheater. Cheaters have not agreed to those rules, and so we should not agree to play with them. We should also not play with strangers who lie. Now, if someone misrepresents their deck, or army, or list, or whatever the game is, we give them their one game, but then there's no obligation to give them more games unless they maybe have been amicable and personable and you or the stranger are willing to adjust for a second better game. If people are willing to adjust for a second better game, then you can. But if someone has lied in order to win by misrepresenting their deck or lying in any other way, then you should reconsider playing with them. Remember that a stranger who lies about a game with no stakes, they will lie about other stuff.
Yeah.
If it's a game that has no stakes, that's not the only thing they've ever lied about. Episode 1 of this podcast has been about establishing actual friendships. You should decide if you're comfortable forming a deeper bond with somebody who treats a stranger this way. It's kind of like when you're dating and you kind of evaluate the person based on how they treat the waiter on your date.
Yeah.
If they're going to treat a stranger this way, then do I want to form a longer lasting bond with this person and spend more time with them? I mean, kind of the running byline through all of these episodes is that our time is one of our most precious commodities. That's why we want payoff whenever we play together. If somebody hasn't respected my time by lying, then should I lose more of it with future games? I just wanted to make sure to hit those points. That liars and cheaters have not agreed to the rules. They have not agreed to upholding the promises made in a Session 0 or a Rule 0 conversation or discussion.
Yeah.
Anything you guys want to add there?
I remember, God, it's been about 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago now.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a minute. I don't know if it was pre-COVID or not. We were playing a game. I think it was down to just Travis, Randy, and I. I think Benjamin had been knocked out, or maybe he wasn't playing. And I made a deal with Randy saying something like, if I do this for you, will you not kill me in return? Or something like that. Like, I was going to save his life to, whatever. I can't remember. And he's like, yeah, sure. So I did my part. I think I knocked Travis out, or maybe I got him low. But I had to, invest all my resources into it. And then when Randy comes around, he's like, oh,
you're completely defenseless, and it's only between the two of us now, so...
Yeah, so he's like, sorry. Which it wasn't really lying. He just kind of was dishonorable. But it was enough of an
Again,
incident
the man
where-
is not here to defend himself today.
I'll text him after this, let him know that we were, talking shit. It wasn't a big deal, but I'm still talking about it years later. If he was a stranger, I don't know if
Exactly. I do think it's very different if it's between just us
Yeah.
and somebody goes back on a deal or something. But again, because if it's just us, then we could play that off as, oh, I was playing a character, or, oh, but what a story that made that we can retell the next time we're together. Because our bonds are closer, and we know that there are more games coming in the future.
And you can make him
so,
pay for that.
Yeah,
in
and I
future
did
games.
for months.
Exactly. You can still hold that over him, and each individual game we play becomes part of a larger narrative, part of a larger, set of battles, an entire war, rather than just a single isolated session. Playing with strangers is the idea that, listen, there may only be one game with you. I may only be with you for an hour and a half. I want to make sure that we both still have a good time there.
Yeah, and I think that's different, what you just described, like politicking or going back on a deal in a game. That's a way to just figure out what kind of a person someone is and how you're going to treat deals with them in future games. Like if a stranger,
I'll never trade with Benjamin in Monopoly.
yeah, exactly. That's Will's doing.
Will poisoned me long ago.
But I would still play with someone who went back on a deal if they hadn't lied or been horrible out of the game. Like, to me, that's an in-game action. I won't hold that against them. Like trying to win with like making a deal and going back on it. I'll be like, well, I'm just not going to make any more deals with you. But like, if we come in and say, hey, we're playing pretty low power here, like upgraded precons, and he says, okay, no problem, and then pulls out a 9, a power level, a something that has a bunch of expensive reserve list cards. They go turn 1, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Mimnarch, go.
I mean, that guy's Narset Enlightened Master Infinite Turns deck.
Yeah.
It was just full of Planeswalkers and Infinite Turns. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's clearly not on the same power level as an upgraded pre-constructed deck. And so that is going to... Like, I'm not going to play with that person again because I can't trust them to, one, want to have a good time, or at least on the same terms as me. I can't trust that we're even speaking the same language. Like, what does power level mean? What does a game of Magic... Like, what do you want out of this? We're playing 2 different games, and they're not willing to agree to the rules, like you said. That's different. And, of course, cheating, as you mentioned, I totally agree. Like, once you establish somebody as a cheater, they're not playing that game. No one's going to have fun. If they're having fun with that, that's a problem.
All right, Benjamin, give us a last nugget of wisdom to close this episode out on.
Dang. Okay. So, overall, what all this boils down to is good communication about expectations, right? And it applies to more than gaming. It applies to everything in your life. Managing expectations can help you with your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, your bosses, everything, every person that you have to deal with. When you let them know ahead of time, this is what I have to offer, this is what I'm going to do for you, and then you fulfill those expectations as you describe them, that makes everyone's life better. Makes your life better. People are pleased with your service. They're pleased with your relationship. And you have given to people in a powerful way. And hopefully are receiving that same thing in return. So clear communication about your expectations is a wonderful way to go through life. And a wonderful way to go through gaming.
Hot damn, I knew I'd be able to count on you for that. All right, well, let's close out this episode. Thank you very much, Benjamin and Derek. I have been Travis, and we hope you guys have great future games with friends and strangers. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was edited by me, Travis Konishek, and our intro and outro music is by Tyler Heath of the Oh Hellos. Check him out.